Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Volume 1 of Cedille's African Heritage Symphonic series, which is still available. You know, nowadays, everybody's making a big, tumult, a tsimis, as we'd say in Yiddish, out of this woke business and the fact that African-American composers are getting attention because they're just African-American or because they're black if they're not American. Look, it was happening for a long time. Really, there's always been a subtext or subcurrent of artistic endeavor devoted to the work of black classical composers, as well there should be. And there needed to be a certain emphasis on them because, just as with women composers or gay composers or whatever, they were getting trashed simply because of who they were. And I need to make this point over and over again because it can't be made too strongly. Some people have said, well, they're only getting attention because they're black, but I would rather listen to quality work and it should be the best work, not just because they're black. That is such crap. These people are, the point in giving them the attention is that they're just as well qualified as all of the quality people that you might otherwise be hearing. But they were getting ignored because they were black. So they're not being chosen just because they're black. They're chosen because they are qualified and disadvantaged because they're black. And that's a very, very different issue, isn't it? Anyway, it just so happens that well before the current 15 minutes of fame for black composers, there was the African Heritage Symphonic series. There was also the Black Composers series on Sony from the 1970s. These things have come and gone as time went on, but this is one of the finest, and it's the brainchild of Paul Freeman, the conductor, who was also the conductor of that Sony series back in the 70s. These were done around 2000, so Paul Freeman has been busy with the Chicago Sinfonietta, and there are some absolutely lovely works in here, which by now have been recorded multiple times, which I think is rather cool. I really do. First, we have Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's the Danse Negre from the African Suite, which is just fun. It's kind of like a Dvorak Slavonic dance goes to Africa, except there's nothing African about it at all. It's just a nice piece of romantic ballet music. Now, the Petite Suite de Concert, which is 13 minutes of delightful little character pieces en français. The pieces are La Caprice de Nanette, and demande et réponse, which is, ask and answer. Un sonnet d'amour, a love sonnet. And la tarentelle frétillante, yes, the frenetic tarantella. It's just a lovely work and fun to listen to, a genuine bonbon of light music. And it was quite popular in Coleridge-Taylor's lifetime. It's been recorded several times. Then we have fella Sowande, who lived from 1905 to 1987. This is the African Suite selections therefrom. It was composed in 1930. Now, this is sort of a, romantic nationalist thing. And, there's a point I want to make here that I think is kind of interesting in this context, which is every country had its own romantic nationalist awakening. We tend to disregard all of the ones that happened after 1900 because Germany never really had one, and neither did France, because they had big institutionalized musical cultures going way back when. But countries like the UK, or Finland, Scandinavian countries, their romantic nationalist period happened later. Portugal, and they get dissed because after 1900s, music, supposedly, went along the lines of, atonality and all this stuff, the avant-garde and whatnot. But the reality is that every country does it when they do it, when they have the opportunity. And a lot of third world countries or disadvantaged countries or non-Western countries that finally decided to participate in the world of Western art music had their romantic nationalist period. I mean, in Mexico, it was quite recently. In the United States, it was post World War I for the most part. And, when we started using indigenous themes and materials and looking at native peoples, Dvorak suggested we do that in the 1890s, and everybody screamed and yelled and carried on because it was a racist white culture at that time. Let's not kid ourselves. And so it happens when it happens. And so in this case, the case with African composers is a very interesting one because you're dealing basically with a diaspora. It's quite similar to Jewish composers. They are living in other countries and coming to grips with their own heritage, sometimes their African heritage, and also incorporating elements from whatever culture they happen to be living in. And that's what happened here with fellow Sowande, the African suite. There's a joyful day, nostalgia, and then this thing called akinla. There we go. And akinla, let's describe what it is in here. I already forgot. It's nice music. It's pleasant, romantic, nationalist music. No more, no less. And, we can't be obsessed with timing issues that, it was written after 19 Black, therefore, it's after 19 Black, it's no longer legitimate. No, it needs to be compared with other works of its type, not with whatever Schoenberg was doing. You see what I mean? What the difference is? Because in the grand scheme of things, in the year 3865, nobody is going to care about the 50-year difference between this thing and 19th century romantic nationalism and modern music, because it's all going to just be one giant clump of indistinguishable noise. So there you go. And then last but not least, William Grant Still's Afro-American Symphony, which has been recorded many, many times. This is a very fine performance. It really is. Freeman really nails it with the Chicago Sinfonietta. Now, Still is, I still, it's hard to have a name like Still when you talk about, Still is still, I think, a seriously neglected composer, a major voice in the first half of the 20th century in American music, and he wrote 5 symphonies and other symphony-like pieces that are really lovely, wonderful to hear. This is one of them, and what most people neglect to mention, as I said before, the last recording of this that I talked about, it's a deeply tragic work, a very serious work. The finale is really riveting if you pay attention to it. You can listen to it and say, oh, it's sort of light in the Gershwin jazzy kind of style. But if you pay attention to what the emotional intent of the work is, it's really a very, very profound statement in many ways, as you might expect from a composer who is dealing with his Afro-American heritage, which is mostly tragic. And I do wish people would give this music credit for having the depth of expression that I hear in it, very self-evidently. It's the same thing with Florence Price and some of these other composers from the first half of the 20th century. Their music is really, really serious and expressive of a people's anguish as often as not. It's as well as being very, very beautiful and a joy to listen to. And so this whole disc, which is splendidly recorded, is excellent. And there are 2 more, which we will talk about in due course. So the African Heritage Series, the African Heritage Symphonic Series, Volume 1 on Cedille. Marvelous music, well worth hearing. You may have gathered it from other sources, but I do want to point out that this was here, and it was here back in 2000, before all the current stuff started happening. Cedille was prescient in that regard, and they deserve full credit, as does Paul Freeman, who has been a ceaseless advocate of this music for his entire career. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.